Hello, thank you very much for welcoming me today. And the topic that we'll cover today is very broad, so it will require probably several days to talk about, which is about neuroscience, mindfulness, and how it can impact positively our well-being and performance in our life or at work. But I will try to summarize that in a few minutes and give you some hints on how to feel better. So let's start with cool figures. Some cool facts about the brain. Our brain has 86 billion neurons, and each of them can transmit 1,000 nerve impulses per second. And they have tens of thousands of synaptic contacts with other neurons. So it's very complex. Something which is important also is that the human brains represent 2% of our total weight, but 20% of the total energy and oxygen intake. Also, one part of our brain, which is about our thinking, is actually the prefrontal cortex. It represents only 4% of the brain volume, but uses 80% of the energy. And you may not know, but our brain generates about 50, 60,000 thoughts a day. It's quite broad, and 95% of all the cognitions occurs in the subconscious mind. So that's quite crazy. So neuroscience has evolved a lot, and it brought a lot of knowledge about how we work, how our brain works, and how we can actually improve our well-being over the years. When we start, for example, in the 80s, 50s, we were analyzing more the lesions between the different parts of the brain. Then in 1930s, it was more about the brain waves and the high frequency waves, the low frequency waves when we are meditating or relaxing. Then it moved into the 1980s with analyzing the different activity of the brain regions through MRI, for example. And in the last decade, it was more focusing on what we call connectome, which is the neural networks and the main functions of the brain. So a lot of very interesting studies, but I won't go into details today because otherwise it would be too long. But what is important to understand, for example, is that we've got three main parts in our brain, and each of them correspond to different stage of our evolution. The oldest one, the brainstem, that we can see on the bottom in blue, is the oldest with 300 million years old. And it maintains our body functions, like, for example, breathing, hearing, motor control, even saliva or tears. And it also has a role of routing the information up and down our body. The limbic system, which is more in the middle, you can see the circle area in the middle, is actually quite old too, 200 million years old. And it fulfills more our animal needs and emotions. And this part actually has different sub-elements that I will talk about more later in the presentation. One of them is the amygdala, which is about our basic emotions. Another one is the hippocampus, which is about memory formation. And another one is the basal ganglia, which is about habit formation and the reward system. The most recent part, which is only 150,000 years old, is the cortex. And it's where our complex cognitive processes are being done. So it's about perception, planning, abstract thinking, languages. It has two hemispheres. And one part of it is actually the prefrontal cortex that I will talk about more later, which is the kind of CEO of our brain. So just for your information, as I mentioned before, for example, in the limbic system, there is the amygdala, and which manages our basic emotions. We've got multiple emotions. One of them is fear, which creates stress, therefore. And the way we react to fears, to emotions, and we relate that to memories is based by the amygdala. And when we perceive a threat, usually we've got two different ways. We can either go the instinctive way, and it's the amygdala, short way, and it triggers the amygdala, and we react in three types of reaction. Either we fight, or we flight, or we freeze, and we can't do anything. We lose our full control. And usually the stress reduces our cognitive capabilities by 75%. And that has a nervous but also a hormonal component of the stress. And there's some hormones that are actually used or triggered with stress is cortisol and adrenaline. Cortisol, for example, has also a side effect which impacts your immune system. So chronic stress could actually have a bad impact on your health and also therefore create inflammation. So that's a side effect that also it's important to understand. But in the professional context, how is the amygdala triggered? So for example, there are many ways that amygdala can be triggered. It's if you feel that you have been given unrealistic targets or deadlines, or if you feel unappreciated, treated unfairly, you are not listened to or heard. All these reasons can actually fire the amygdala, and your response will be therefore defensive or aggressive reaction, which is definitely not what we expect in a professional environment. So what you need to do is not to let the amygdala do the talking. You need to re-empower your prefrontal cortex to bring more rational thinking to the response of the trigger. And one element which is key in that is that you need to bring space between the stimulus and the response. And that space is our power to choose our reaction and our response. So what are the 5 steps to deal with emotional triggers? First, stop. Then breathe. Then notice, be aware of what's happening, reflect on it, and then respond. And by going through the steps, you are less likely to let the amygdala do the work and more the prefrontal cortex to actually respond more in a more appropriate way. So at work or in our life, we always need to execute multiple tasks. So how does multitasking impact your well-being and your stress? What is important is actually to understand that humans are not capable of multitasking. We only task switch. And that's very interesting to know because you will therefore be more understandable on how technology impacts, also notifications from technology impacts our well-being too later. But if you manage one task, for example, you can see that in the 2 hemispheres, in the first picture of our prefrontal cortex, that single task is being managed by both sides simultaneously. So you are efficient at handling the task. If you got 2 tasks, both tasks are split in each side. So one task is on one side, one task is managed by the other task, the side of the prefrontal cortex, but not simultaneously. We actually switch from one task to another, and the brain can actually manage those 2 simultaneously. So it reduces performance and leads to mistakes. It has also a stressful element of it because it creates mental fatigue, it deteriorates your mood, you create much more mistakes. There are very few people who can actually multitask. Actually, no more than 3% of the population from what the researchers show. They are called supertaskers. But one interesting thing about it is that usually when they do 2 tasks, one of these tasks is an automated task, something that are very used to do on a regular basis. And therefore, it's managed by another part of the brain. So that's why actually they're quite efficient at it. So one thing which I would like to explain also is that the pandemic also showed us that we accelerated the digitization of our world. And technology definitely has also an impact on our well-being. But how? And neuroscience brings some insight on that too. First of all, you need to understand that there are 3 types of attentions. The sustained attention, which is about maintaining a prolonged focus during repetitive activities. The selective attention, which is about avoiding distractions when you work on one specific task. And the alternating attention, which is about being efficient at switching between different tasks. Actually, technology has a negative impact on the first 2 because it decreases actually the sustained and selective attention through media consumptions, multi-screening behaviors, social media interruptions and notifications, etc. Only the last one, which is the alternative attention, increases with multi-screen behaviors and up to a certain extent social media interaction. So why actually technology notifications hijack our attentions? One element I mentioned before is that we don't multitask. We can't multitask. So any interruption, distraction from notifications has a huge cognitive cost because it creates fatigue. We are less efficient. We make mistakes. Something which is interesting, for example, is that when you've got a ringtone on your phone, it triggers the same part of your brain as if someone calls you by your name. So it's a part which manages the treatment of personal information. Also, another explanation, you put a phone, mobile phone like this on your table, reduces your cognitive performance. Why? Because in your subconscious, you are expecting notifications to happen. And the last thing, for example, also is if you prevent someone from responding to the phone, to SMS, or checking the notifications, it creates a stress response that can be measured physiologically. Like, for example, your heart rate or your blood pressure increases. So notification hijack is definitely not good for your attention and not good for your well-being. So based on what I've previously said, you may think, oh, I may have a lot of habits to change. But how are habits formed actually on the brain? And how could they be changed? Can they be changed? So that's also what neuroscience explained to us. And an interesting thing is actually the way habits are formed is first you've got a kind of reminder or cue. You associate a behavior or routine to that cue, then you reward it. The reward element is very important. And I mentioned before in the limbic system, the basal ganglia. So that's where habits are formed and also the reward system works. And you repeat that behavior again. So the cue associate the new behavior, you reward it. And after a while of repeating, then that habit becomes anchored into your brain. So when you've got a bad habit, how can you break it? That's quite difficult, actually. Motivation is not enough. Usually when people say, oh, I want to quit smoking, it doesn't work. It's not enough. Motivation doesn't help to do that. You need to rewire your brain to a new behavior. So how would it work? You need to identify the cue which triggers that behavior, then consciously attach a new behavior to it, reward that new behavior, and repeat the new behavior again. An example, for example, is people who have the habit to smoke at the end of a meal. So the cue is the meal, the end of the meal. The routine is smoking. And so therefore, when you are finishing your meal, you need to actually do another behavior, associate a new behavior to the end of the meal. Reward that new behavior, and then repeat until that new habit becomes anchored and has replaced the old one, which was about smoking. So that's the way it works. So just to explain, therefore, a bit further, how mindfulness can help you actually to improve your well-being, but also improve your performance, personal performance, but also at work. And it has been demonstrated by many studies, researches in neuroscience, that it works. So let's explain what is mindfulness first. I like that definition because it summarizes a lot what it means. It's about keeping one's complete attention to the experience of a moment-to-moment basis in an open and non-judgmental way. So let's split that into the 5 main components of mindfulness. The first one is attention. It's about building presence in the moment. So you live in the present. That's very important. Not in the past, not in the future. You live in the present. Open awareness to our sensations, feelings, and emotions. Just be aware of what you feel. Just don't ignore them. Acceptance. So you need to accept those emotions without any judgment. You need to accept others without any judgment. Non-identification with the thoughts and emotions. They are not you. Your thoughts, your emotions are not you. And choice. It's better to choose yourself than to let the automatic behaviors happen, like we explained before with the amygdala hijack. When you put actually a pause, then you can have actually more the prefrontal cortex to take the lead and therefore have a more rational decision and choice. So these are the main components of mindfulness. And there are many practices that you can do to actually do mindfulness and improve your well-being. Some of them are formal practices like meditation or breathing, yoga, relaxation. Others are actually mindfulness during activity. You can also do that when you eat, when you work, or even walking. For example, you walk in the street. Quite often we just rush. We don't even take time. Just think about the contact of your feet with the ground, the sound of the birds in the trees, the feeling of the wind on your face. All these type of activities that you do in walking will help you actually to reduce the stress and to calm. Another thing which is important also is mindfulness directed towards others. So it's about listening, empathy. It's about kindness, compassion, and gratitude for what you have. All these techniques are very good in terms of improving your performance and well-being. So how mindfulness impacts also the workplace. So with the example I've given before, the personal benefits are huge. You've got improved conditions because you are more effective. You've got less mental fatigue. You've got emotional regulations. You are less likely to react without rational thinking. You improve your stress response. At the workplace, therefore, that has obvious positive consequences on your performance. Because you are more focused, you will be better at managing the job and the task that you've been assigned to. But also you will be feeling more motivated because you are more positive in the way you see things. Gratitude, for example, is important. The more you send positiveness, the more positive things will come back to you. And safety, because you are more aware of your world and your environment, and therefore you are less likely to hurt yourself. Relationship is definitely also another key point in the workplace as a benefit, because you will be more compassion, you will use more compassion, more kind, you will interact more in the communication, you will avoid conflicts, you will also be better at leading and also managing your team. And finally, for yourself, for your own well-being, physical, psychological, or being more able to be resilient, that's definitely also a huge benefit of using mindfulness practices. So, as I've explained, neuroscience has evolved a lot. And in the last decades, I think we've learned much more in how mindfulness practices can actually help also your personal well-being and performance in the workplace and with your peers and family and friends. I know maybe if you want, we can go into the Q&A sessions if you've got any questions among the audience.
Philippe, great. Thanks so much for this talk. I'm very, very happy that you are sharing this with me, and I've worked quite a bit with mindfulness, etc. But you have a very clear way of communicating and explaining the whole concept with us. I'm always very, very curious about the story behind someone that comes on stage and has and explains something. Where's your curiosity coming from? Is there a personal story behind it, maybe? So a personal relationship with mindfulness.
Yes, I would say probably I started meditation after separation, for personal separation. When my son's mother decided to separate, then I felt that I needed to actually to manage the stress or the emotions more effectively. And I started with a meditating techniques. I joined for a group called Brahma Kumaris, which was interesting. They were offering for free some meditating sessions. Then I actually did also some seminars. So all this is very, very good. So sometimes there are things that triggered that change or that awareness. After that, I did some readings. I had also friends recommending me some readings, like for example, the power or the magic from Rhonda Byrne about gratitude and the law of attraction. I had also some person I knew in my environment who created the Mindfulness Institute. And last year and this year, I attended some of the trainings about neuroscience and mindfulness that I used a slide today actually from. So I would like to thank them for that, Arnaud and Veronica. And I, I like to learn. I always like to learn. And I think that when you learn for your own well-being too, it's very important. And I think in my life, I didn't really took the time to step back and to take a pause. And sometimes just having that single moment between the stimulus and the response and take time to actually reflect and breathe, you realize that actually it brings a lot of benefits. And even in the workplace, I could see later on that actually doing less at the workplace, but be more efficient at communicating about what you've done brings much more benefit than actually being always in the do. So that's in the doing. So yes, definitely it relates to personal experience, but also in terms of willing to learn and willing to learn on what benefit oneself also.
I would love to touch the thing about the workplace. One, just to finish off a little bit about your journey. Where are you in your journey now? What are you currently curious about in that journey about mindfulness? What are you currently exploring or searching, or what is your the current what is the current moment in that mindfulness journey? Because I know it's never an event, I'm mindful now, but it's always this process, right? And it's always this journey where you go from stage to stage and something helps, or something is right now, but then you evolve and then it evolves into something else. Can you share a little bit about something personal there, or where
Yes.
how also your your practice of meditation maybe has evolved over time?
Oh yes, definitely. And at the time as we speak, I'm actually in the middle of a online training on the breathing techniques. So it's about learning more, so how to apply different breathing techniques and which one will fit more to myself, because there's not one solution that fits everybody. So I would recommend people to try and test some techniques and see which one are actually better for them. And also I'm into also therefore feeling more of bringing more impact and purpose to what I'm doing. And I've recently started a startup, co-founded a startup with 3 other people, which is about driving sustainability, so helping our planet. So everything relates somehow to what you do. So the more you are conscious about yourself, your well-being and the well-being of others, then therefore you apply that also in your work by actually what can I do to make that impact? What can I do to actually bring more, save the planet? Because we can see the latest IPCC report from UN is terrible. It shows that actually we are not going the right direction. So that's why also I'm more than keen to engage myself in that new journey, which is in addition to my own business about consulting in innovation and digital transformation.
I'm so thankful that you bring that up, because it's also a huge topic that we as Pirate are also thinking about how we can tackle that. We have on Friday, we have the big climate day. The whole day is dedicated to climate tech. We are putting very promising startups that are really making an impact. We're putting them in the spotlight and try to not that they compete against each other, but try to give them support and blow wind into their sails and to try to accelerate them as a community, as Pirate, right, with our network. As last question, I'd love to quickly touch upon if I'm a leader now and I want to, because I saw the benefits that mindfulness can have on the employees, etc., also like real business benefits, where would you advise me to start?
Oh, so it depends if you've got among your team, some people who have that awareness. And I know in my previous company, they were doing some healthy day, or there were some people about knowing about yoga practices, about other things. They were therefore trying to share with the other employees. So you could potentially organize this type of wellness days within your enterprise. If you don't have those competencies within your business, you could potentially ask external consultant to do that. And I think that when the friends I mentioned to you from the Neuro Mindfulness Institute started their business, it was more face-to-face practices with businesses. Actually, they were showing the team how they can actually mindfulness practice can help bring cohesion and also reduce the stress among the working environment. So they could also therefore contact external people who are expert in that area and will bring those type of sessions. Could be half a day, could be a full day session with the top leaders first, because it's important, I think, to bring awareness at the leadership level, because if you don't have backup from leaders, it won't work. It will never go to other people, because it has to be driven from the top to show that it works, and they will be convinced to invest in it for the good of their workforce.
Yeah, wonderful. I have a question from Antonio here. When can you feel that you are truly being present? How can you recognize that in yourself and others?
That's an interesting question. Something I didn't mention during the training, during the presentation, is that when I said that we've got 50 to 60,000 thoughts a day, only 5% are thoughts related to the present moment. So actually 95% of our thoughts that we constantly have are actually not related to the past or to the future. So it's always difficult to know if we are related to the present, but one way probably to do it is to see, okay, that thought is not about judging the thoughts, just being aware of the thoughts that you have, and you can see if it's related to the past or the future, and therefore usually those ones are less efficient. They are wasting your time. So it's better to refocus on doing things now. If you constantly think about what you would like to do in the future, then you will not reach it, because you are not focusing on making it happen now. So actually, it's a waste by really thinking about what you should prioritize, what you should do, be focused. So realizing that you are in the present is being focused on what you do. If you let yourself be interrupted by notifications, it doesn't work. For example, this is a sport watch that I use for sport now mainly, but it's also a connected watch. When I bought it 5 years ago, I used it for 2 years, and I had notifications activated on my watch. I realized I was
Philippe,
constantly interrupted, so I stopped
thank
it.
you.
Now I don't have
to
notification.
interrupt you now as well. I'm very, very sorry, because I'd love to
That's
talk
okay,
further,
no problem, Manuel.
but we are already over our time. Philippe, it was an excellent talk. Thank you so much. Very insightful. It's really for me, it's something very enlightening and always good to always remember. Thanks so much. Everybody that is watching now, I know you have some more questions. Maybe chat with Philippe on the platform. You can find Philippe on LinkedIn as well. Look him up. Philippe, thank you so much, and thanks for sharing your insights with us.
You're welcome. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.